Good afternoon, everybody. Dr. Vasquez here, coming to you live. Much more live than I was, I guess, about a month ago when I was getting over bronchitis. So, hope you're all doing well. Hope you all missed me at least a little bit. Come on, give me something. You'll notice that I have a new mascot behind me. It's a moose head. It's actually made out of ceramic and epoxy, but it looks pretty real because my wife is a great artist who's able to paint things. So, I don't want you to turn me into animal control or animal rights or something thinking that's a real moose head. Just like that's not a real bird over there. That's also like this ceramic epoxy mix. So anyway, just want to provide a little context. I don't have a name for the bird, but the name for the moose head is Bullwinkle. Some of you might remember that.
And here coming out of the lobby and past the white mice are our two heroes, Rocket Squirrel and Bullwinkle Moose.
Anyway, today's topic for right now is what's apparently making the news, even though it's not actually brand new news. A lot of people are talking about this fake laboratory grown fake meat that's now in the market, apparently in the markets in the United States.
More and more bioengineered food is coming into grocery stores, and it's important to know if you are eating real high quality food or if it's fake meat. Lab grown, synthetic, those are words you will never ever see on a package because those are scary words. They're doing everything they can to use words that trick us to make it seem like it's better than it actually is. So what's happening is we're seeing words that sound way more natural. The word that you're looking for on the packages is cell cultured.
The word you need to look for is cell cultured. Yes, U.S. legislators have already made it legal, and the USDA has already approved labels like cell cultivated chicken and cell cultivated beef.
So I saw some information about that. I have read some of the documents from the Food and Drug Administration and also, I believe, the US FDA. US FDA, that is the Food and Drug Administration. So this is the USDA, which is Department of Agriculture. So we're going to talk about this article right now. This is titled Human Food Made with Cultured Animal Cells. So in other words, it's just fucking bullshit, and they're going to call it food. So I'm going to talk a little bit about my scientific concerns, and I'll show you the document. I'll post the document on my own website. It is an official government website, and it's secure. They state that at the top. But as usual, what I'm going to do right now is just go through the document itself, and then I will post it with my highlights and comments as soon as the screen gets balanced out. So what they're talking about here in this document, which I just looked at, I just downloaded it today. I don't know when it was actually published. Maybe they state that at the end. Or maybe it's just a perpetual document. They do not date this article. Oh, I'm sorry. Here it says last updated August 17th, 2023. So it's got 2.5 years on it. But apparently it's still current because, like I said, I just downloaded it today. So this is about the new fake food in the United States. So I'm going to talk about this from a clinical and medical standpoint, and also just like an American standpoint. I mean, but I'm going to focus mostly on the biochemistry of this, and then I'll get mouthy in the second half, and I'll go through a few notes that I wrote about my social contextualization of this fake food. So as you would expect, I mean, this is the real deal. They are talking about creating food, not harvesting food. So usually people don't create food. They grow plants and farm plants and animals, and then we use, that substance to, create something that we want to eat. But we're not actually creating the food itself necessarily. But now they're talking about actively creating food. And they talk about it being, they just give lip service. I mean, I can't talk about this topic without being offended and therefore potentially offensive to some people. So that's just the way it is. I'm sure you're all used to some level of profanity these days because we've had Donald Trump in office now for the second time for over a year now. And, he talks about murdering people all the time. So, including erasing entire civilizations. So, I mean, we can't just be pansies anymore in the world that we live in. So as usual, they talk about, they use very vague language, as you would expect from a government document. So they talk about creating food. They talk about it being an emerging area of food science. Well, let me tell you, as an American consumer, an American citizen, an American doctor, I don't give a flying fuck about an emerging area of food science. I don't want this stuff. This stuff should not be in the stores. So let's just review basic reality for a second here. You know, like when they launched the COVID vaccines back in late 2000, after supposedly they had been created within 9 months, what they said to everyone, and the official government rhetoric was that these had already been proven to be safe and effective. Well, guess what? For a lot of drugs, for a lot of environmental exposures like radiation, no one knows if it's going to be a safe dose or a safe product for decades, sometimes 20 years, sometimes 30, 40, 50 years. So the fact that they're trying to say, oops, sorry, let me turn my fan off. That's what's making my nose run a little bit, I suppose. What they're trying to say here by introducing this topic, they're trying to say we're going to make sure it's safe and effective. They have no chance in hell of making sure this is safe and effective. So, and that will become more clear as I go through their own document. So this is already going to be a huge scandal, but that doesn't really seem to matter anymore. You know, one of the things that I've noticed, and if you have your head out of the sand, then you would have had to have noticed it by now as well. And that is, sorry, I'm gonna turn that off. Scandal doesn't matter anymore. I mean, look at the COVID scandal. Look at the vaccine scandals that we've had. Look at the drug scandals. They get fined a little bit. They get a slap on the wrist. They write it off as a business expense. They don't pay taxes on that money. And they keep doing it. So the idea, again, this document was created in 2023. Now, in 2026, people are already saying that this food is now in the stores. There's no chance in hell that in less than 3 years, they've already established this as safe and effective. That would take years of even just doing animal studies. So, for example, usually the routine is we have in the sequence of research and evidence. This is a theme consistent with what's called constructing biological plausibility and ultimately resulting in clinical safety. But we have biochemistry, we have cell cultures, we have animal studies, and then we would go into limited human studies and exposures, and eventually we would have data that we could all agree on 20 years later, 30 years later is reasonably safe. Well, they're never going to have that. Even if they had started the research on the day they published this, less than 3 years ago, and they created these fake foods and they started feeding them to other species of animals, especially including apes and chimpanzees and things like that are more similar to us, they still wouldn't have safety data. So they have no chance in hell of legitimately saying they have safety data on this. They don't have safety data. And again, like I said, in parallel, this is exactly what they did with the COVID vaccines. They said from virus launch to vaccine was about 9 months. Well, they could not have established 10, 20, 30 years of safety data within that much time. I mean, it's just impossible. So this is just absurd. So again, here on the second page, they do talk about selling these foods in the US. Apparently that's happening now. And then they talk about the process. You can read all the details if you want. I'm just going to tell you what they say. They basically take a biopsy or some cells out of whatever animal, and then they filter those or select which ones are going to grow better, just like they did with the aborted human cells that ultimately became the culture media for certain vaccines. And then they immortalize those cells by exposing them to a select batch of nutrients, usually cytokines and growth factors and things like that. Because what they're going to start with is a normal cell. Then they have to revert that cell into a more primitive type of cell called an undifferentiated clone. So, if they start with a mature animal, unless they go fishing around for stem cells, then they're going to start with a differentiated cell, which means it's a cell that has already decided what it is. It's either a skin cell or a bone cell or a muscle cell. But if they either have to start with an undifferentiated stem cell, or they have to start with a normal cell and then revert it back into a primitive, again, what we call undifferentiated clone. Well, you know what else is an undifferentiated clone? Cancer cells. So basically what they're going to do is turn these undifferentiated clone cells into kind of a tumor that eventually kind of looks like either cartilage or connective tissue or fat or muscle, and they're going to mix that around until they come out with a product that someone's going to buy in the form of so-called meat, but it's not meat. And the point is, imagine, like I said, everything that I'm saying loosely right now is what's written in this document. Excuse me. I'm just translating it into kind of common language with a little bit of attitude. But basically, they have to start with an undifferentiated clone, whether they pull that out of the animal directly in the form of a stem cell or they create it one way or another. They're basically starting with an undifferentiated clone that's going to self-multiply, and that's what cancer is. So they either start with the cancer cell or they're basically creating cancer out of these cells. And then they're going to sell that to you as meat. So you'll notice step 2 is grow the growth and cellular multiplication by adding appropriate nutrients and other factors. Those are going to be things like hormones and cytokines and things like that to make these cells reproduce. And then people are going to eat that. Well, if they're using a concoction to create undifferentiated clones that self-replicate, and then they're going to feed that same chemical broth to people, because they're always going to have some contamination. They can talk about filtering, they can talk about cleaning, and mostly they can just ignore the whole topic and then cover it up when it becomes a problem. Because that is exactly what they did with the contaminated COVID vaccines. The COVID vaccines were never appropriately standardized. They were never produced under strict regulation that allowed consistent batch by batch production. And that you can bet, I mean, this is even more radical, so you can bet the same thing's going to happen here. This is just going to be a disaster. So again, if they start with a normal animal cell, and then they have to kind of regress that cell into an undifferentiated clone, that's kind of like similar to taking a normal cell and then turning it into a cancerous cell. And then putting it in some type of broth to make it self-replicate. That's also kind of looking like cancer. And the people are supposed to eat that with these chemicals and growth factors and cytokines and mutagens and whatever else they used. That's still going to be in the final product. I don't see any way in hell they're going to have such a great filtering mechanism. I mean, at least with a vaccine, for example, you're filtering down to particles and, well, it shouldn't even have cells in it, but you're down to like molecules and DNA and proteins. Here, they're talking about not only molecules and proteins, which could have adverse effects on their own, but they're talking about entire cells and entire tissues and 3D printed tissues. They have no possibility whatsoever of being able to control the contamination within that final product. So this is just insane. So this is coming out of the FDA, and I just made a small note. You'll see it on the page. I just wrote it kind of in the red ink right there. This is being overseen, so to speak, by the FDA. Those are the same people who banned a natural essential amino acid called tryptophan. So the same government organization that bans natural essential nutrients, the same organization that tries to ban and penalize anyone for drinking raw milk, which, by the way, most of the world uses raw milk. I mean, if you go to Colombia, the milk is dairy products are fantastic, and probably most of them are raw. I mean, they may be boiled in somebody's kitchen, but the majority of dairy products in Colombia, at least to my knowledge, are not, factory pasteurized. They may be flash pasteurized in somebody's kitchen, if that. The same thing is true in France. I mean, a lot of the dairy products in France are, first of all, famously delicious and gourmet quality, but they're also raw milk. But no, in the United States, you can't have raw milk. And like I said, also, this is the same organization that approved the COVID vaccines based on essentially no data about transmission, infection, or regulatory compliance with the production method. So I just see this as complete bullshit and a complete disaster. I've tried to be gentle about this because I didn't want to overstate the situation. And obviously we've seen the situation develop over the past year under the second Trump administration. But I mean, the United States is it's just a crazy place. I mean, it's like an insane asylum for any normal, rational human being. And I guess that segues me into my second part of the conversation here. under the title of Reality Check. So the questions that I wrote to myself this morning, maybe while I was working out or something like that, I don't know, I just kind of scribbled a few things that you can see here. Like, why can't the United States just be normal? Like, why not just have normal food, make it safe, make it affordable, pay your farmers a reasonable salary, like a living salary, so they're not on the verge of bankruptcy and suicide all the time. Like, I just don't understand what's going on in the United States that makes it such a constant insane asylum. Like, why are we even talking about cultured animal cell food when we could just have normal food and normal farms? So that's one of my overarching question for the United States, speaking as an American, is why can't we just be fucking normal for once, you know? Everything's privatized, everything's synthetic, everything's, you know, big guns all the time, either for war or technology or new science. I don't give a damn about the science. I just want to eat normal food. And American food is not normal anymore. If you want to have better food than the United States, you go to Europe. If you want to have better food than Europe, the best food I've ever had in my life is definitely Colombian food. Cheap, fresh, was probably just pulled out of the ground or somebody's farm within the last 3 days. Because, like I've said before, and as everybody should know by now, the United States has so much transport infrastructure dedicated to food that you can grow a lettuce in California and have it in New York, a couple days later, a week later, or whatever. But the food is never really fresh. So the paradox there is that more infrastructure actually gives you worse food because of the way the food gets grown and distributed in two different parts of the country. So let's see. So again, question number one was, why can't the United States just be fucking normal? Just grow normal fucking food, pay your farmers a decent salary, try to eliminate the middleman as much as possible, because apparently that's where all the money goes. So you've got farmers, you've got distributors, and you've got grocers, and then you have consumers. The farmers in the United States are notoriously getting ripped off, even back since like the 70s and 80s. That's why back in the 70s and 80s, I think Willie Nelson did some big concert called Farm Aid or something like that. It was like this big fundraiser, like crowdfunding for farmers because they couldn't afford their own farms. So the farmers are getting screwed. At the other end, American consumers eat garbage food with no taste, and they're paying way too much money for it. And now it's not even real food anymore. So these people the producers are getting ripped off, the consumers are getting ripped off, and all the profit is getting stuck in the middle with the distribution and the final sale. I mean, it's just perverted. So, sorry, I'm just going to read my notes the way that I wrote them. They're unfiltered. So this takes another way of saying, why can't the United States just be normal? Here's the way that I wrote it is, why is the United States so fucked all the time? I mean, nothing makes sense in the United States. For example, Trump said he was going to make America great again. Well, what does America need in order to be great, assuming it was ever great at one point in time? We can't go back. So if we wanted to go forward, how could we make America great? Well, you could start with like infrastructure, renovating like the roads and the bridges, public spaces, and how about mass transit? The United States doesn't even have national mass transit. So other than, highways, that just keeps people trapped in private cars with private insurance and private gas and private cars and private maintenance and all this stuff. So it's just a money suck. That's not infrastructure. So what the United States needed and still needs is an infrastructure program. But no, Trump had to go blow $50 billion in Iran. 3 of those missiles, what were they? Were they so-called Patriot missiles? I guess if you blow a couple of $1 million on a missile and you call it a Patriot missile, then you can't really ask a question about it, right? It's already a Patriot. You've already defined it as a Patriot missile. So, I mean, you can't say, well, shit, why are we spending so much money on missiles? Oh, well, it's a Patriot missile. That means just by questioning it, you're already unpatriotic. I think that's part of the logic that goes on there, the fake logic. But anyway, they bombed a girls' school 3 times and killed about 165 little schoolgirls. And that was the start of them spending $50 billion.
I was a counterterrorism officer in the U.S. Army. And I want to give you the definition of terrorism as we use it here in the United States. Terrorism is the premeditated use of violence or threat of violence against civilians or property to induce fear, coercion, or intimidation aimed at government or societies to achieve political, religious, or ideological objectives. Given this information, we're going to focus back now to the bombing of Manab. 165 little girls were killed by United States Tomahawks from a United States vessel in the area of operation. A modern Tomahawk missile is equipped with onboard cameras, real-time targeting imagery. Satellite imagery is constantly collected by several intelligence agencies, several countries in real time. Let's talk about what that satellite imagery would show of the Manab little girls' school. Murals. The entire school was surrounded by colorful children painting, flower, bright color murals surrounded this school. And it was, without a doubt, a school if you looked at it through satellite imagery. It was, without a doubt, a school when you looked at it through the onboard camera of the Tomahawk missile. It was clear. Now let's talk about when the attack started on Iran. 10 a.m. At 10 a.m., Israel, along with the United States, began attacking Iran. By 10:20, the staff at Manab school began evacuating the children. Strike one. Hit the school. The kids moved to the prayer room. Strike two. Hit the prayer room. 163 kids dead. Strike three. Hit nearby. Multiple sources, including intelligence reports, regional sources, and U.S. officials are required to confirm a target for the U.S. Navy and military operations to ensure accuracy and reduce errors. This is how it works.
Well, we could have spent that $50 billion on a mass transit program that would have provided infrastructure, kind of a national renewal, and obviously tons of jobs, both in the construction and in the creation of what's necessary for that construction. You know, so for example, if you think of railroads, like I think of, high-speed rail, because we lived in Europe for a couple of years, and virtually all of Europe is interconnected with this international system of trains, high-speed trains, 300 kilometers an hour. I guess it's about 180 miles per hour, something like that. So why doesn't the United States have anything close to that? Even China has it, even Mexico has it, even some cities in the so-called third world, like we were a couple of months ago, we were in Chile. Even they have some trains that the United States doesn't have. And that's nothing new. They've had these trains for 40, 50 years, and the United States still doesn't have, something similar. So, and Amtrak is just a joke, a bad joke. It's actually kind of an insult. So I just don't understand why the United States can never invest in itself, mind its own business, take care of its own, and cultivate normal food for normal people at a normal price and pay your farmers. But no, we have to invade Iraq. I guess we didn't actually have to invade Iraq. And we certainly didn't have to kill 165 schoolgirls. So, and I'll finish this out by just stating a way to understand this from Noam Chomsky many years ago, many years ago, maybe 30 years ago. Chomsky said, and this is the answer to my rhetorical question, when I ask the question, why is the United States so fucked up all the time? And why can't the country just be normal? Why can't our country, with our tax dollars, with our elected politicians, why can't our country be normal? And the way that Noam Chomsky answered that question many years ago, again, this was like 30 years ago, he said, when you think of the United States, or when you talk about the United States, he says you have to think about what are you talking about? What is the United States? Is the United States the citizens, or is it the politicians, or is it the people who pull the strings of the politicians? Because who's trying to make American food fake? I mean, why does the United States create fake food for its own citizens when it could just make healthy food? No need for this exists, right? Americans have no need to eat food grown in a laboratory and then sold as a piece of meat, like a piece of chicken or a steak. No need for that exists. Just because the technology exists, that's great. Maybe I can't even, I was about to say you could use it to make pet food, but I don't even think that's appropriate. This is going to be inherently unsafe, just like vaccines were declared to be inherently unsafe. They're talking about using undifferentiated clones that self-replicate, and that is what cancer is. Cancer is undifferentiated clones that self-replicate. So this is a cancer broth that they have no chance in hell of being able to clean and filter and therefore guarantee any level of safety. But like, why can't we just have a normal food? So like I was saying, the way that Noam Chomsky explained that, he said, you have to think about, when you think about the United States, what is the United States? The people certainly sure as hell didn't vote for this. Just like the people of the United States did not vote to kill 165 Iranian schoolgirls. Maybe some politicians voted for this because they're paid off. So that's called bribed, which is illegal in most countries, but it's just called lobbying in the United States. And then of course you've got like the social masters and the whatever. I don't like to call them elite, but the people who actually control the politicians, and we've seen that obviously over the last couple of years. So I mean, this is just insane. But
young generation, like Prime Minister Trudeau, half of this cabinet are actually young noble leaders of the world economy. We penetrate the cabinets. The change is not just happening. The change can be shaped by us. We have to prepare for a more angry world. How to prepare? Takes the necessary action to create a fairer world. I see the need for a great reset. So people assume we are just going back to the good old world which we had, and everything will be normal again. This is, let's say, fiction. It will not happen.
There is only one way this pandemic is going to go. It's going to get worse and worse and worse.
The next crisis is already waiting for us around the corner, and it is the climate crisis.
I do, mouth off on this topic every once in a while here, kind of bridging the gap between nutrition and food and this insane social and political environment that is the United States. Like, why can't the country just be normal and make normal food with some level of regulation? Oh, because that would be socialism, right? That would be socialism and communism to actually have market regulation. But what you have, like I've already drawn, and as everyone knows, you've got broke farmers trying to make food. A lot of them signed on to Monsanto, so I mean they kind of got screwed out of their own farms. But let's assume you've got good intentioned farmers over here trying to grow healthy food, and they're broke. And then you have the American consumer over here eating laboratory garbage made with chemicals, and it's expensive, so they're broke. And all the profit is here in the middle between distribution and the ultimate point of sale. But I mean, this is just insane. United States needs obviously some level of regulation so that the system actually works. The society needs to work for the people in the society. And right now, it's not working for the farmers. It's not working for the 350 million consumers at the other end. It works for a few people here, and then the handful of people who are going to profit from laboratory made meat in the United States. I just think the whole thing is disgusting. I would not get anywhere near that stuff. I wouldn't even feed it to my dog. So I was about to say, well, maybe they could use this for dog food and cat food. But why would you? First of all, ethically, why would you want to do that? But second of all, from a medical standpoint, this is going to create a tidal wave, a tsunami of chemicals that are left over from this process that are designed to basically create this meat tumor. And where's that going to go? It's going to go into the water supply. So I just see this as a disaster, so I wanted to make a relatively quick comment about it. I hope you're all doing well. Take care. Bye-bye.
Secretary Lutnick, why did you lie to the New York Post about your relationship with Jeffrey Epstein? Oh, I did hear that. Please don't repeat your gracious offer to speak behind closed doors, not under oath, without the ability of this committee to question you. The American people wants to know, why did you lie about your relationship with Epstein?
The House Oversight Committee and I have agreed
We
will
the
spend
appropriate
the time
reclaiming my
together.
time. I do not accept that answer. We've heard that one. We are our own committee. We have our own reason to test your credibility and veracity. Please answer the question. Why did you lie to the Post?
I have voluntarily agreed
Okay,
to spend the time and talk about it.
I reclaim the time. Let the record reflect you're dodging the question. The cover-up continues. You know what? In your conversations with the president, is the president concerned about your continued relationship that you had with Mr. Epstein as recently as 2018?
I am not going to discuss conversations I have with the president. That is not something I'm going to do.
If you remember in that interview, you said you would never be in the room with him socially, for business, or even philanthropy. President Trump has just fired 3 cabinet secretaries, 3 women, Kristi Noem, Pam Bondi, Lori Chavez DeRemer. If President Trump has even a shred of concern about accountability for Jeffrey Epstein's enablers, he would fire you too. Beyond AdFin, what other financial ties do you have to Jeffrey Epstein?
As I said, I'm going to answer all these
Beyond
questions.
AdFin, what other financial ties? You're the Commerce Secretary. We have a right to ask this question and get it answered.
Again, I'm not going to spend the budget day discussing something I've set aside time to spend on this topic
I'm going to
with your
switch
House
topics.
colleagues.
Mr. Secretary, as you know, I represent San Diego, the largest military community in the country. Right now, as we are speaking, 2,500 San Diego Marines are off the coast of Iran. Many, many other San Diegans in uniform have gotten 48-hour deployment notices. So this war in Iran is not theoretical for me or for my constituents. It's deeply personal. As you also know, on Easter Sunday, President Trump threatened to destroy Iran's bridges and power plants, writing, quote, "Open the fucking strait, you crazy bastards, or you'll be living in hell. Just watch." And 2 days later, President Trump wrote, quote, "A whole civilization will die tonight, never to be brought back again. I don't want that to happen, but it probably will." My office's phones have been ringing off the hook. I've heard from so many military families concerned about the president's mental fitness and whether he's fit to serve as our commander-in-chief, given that he's sending their loved ones into harm's way. Our troops, who have shown incredible bravery and tactical proficiency, deserve to know that their leaders are focused and stable. So, Mr. Secretary, you are with the president a lot, and it pains me to even have to ask this about our president, but my constituents' lives are at stake. Do you believe that the president is mentally stable enough to be the commander-in-chief?
Did you ask the same question of Joe Biden for 4 years?
Mr. Secretary, Joe Biden is not the president. Mr. Trump has been president for a year and a half, and I'm asking you
did
right
not,
now.
and I won't even engage with the level of disparagement that you're putting on the commander-in-chief, who indeed is. Meeting
Mr.
him
Secretary,
every single day.
Mr. Secretary, Biden is not the president.
He's the sharpest, most insightful commander-in-chief we've had in generations. And you want to compare? I mean, you want to ask that question after you and your fellow Democrats defended Joe Biden, who could barely speak and didn't know what day of the week it was?
As you know,
he governed through an auto pen.
When
he had a Secretary of Defense who went AWOL for a week. I can't be gone for 10 days, for 10 minutes.
I will reclaim my time.
Gentlelady's time. She's reclaimed it.
So, as Mr. Jimenez said, we should be taking leaders at their word. So is there a reason that we should not be taking our leader at his word?
Iran should not underestimate the will of President Trump and the United States military to achieve our mission.
Okay, well, I want you to know this is not a partisan thing. In fact, many Democrats have had, many Republicans have had these same questions. Marjorie Taylor Greene said he's out of control and he's gone insane. Candace Owens said the 25th Amendment needs to be invoked. Megyn Kelly, Tucker Carlson, who you used to work with, Alex Jones, Stephanie Grisham, the list could go on. So how do I explain to my constituents that while they are in harm's way, their commander-in-chief is posting these unhinged posts?
How did you explain to your constituents what happened on October 7th? Or what happened in Afghanistan? Or what happened with the debacle and the withdrawal in Afghanistan, where the troops were left? How did you explain that with Joe Biden's leadership?
Mr. Secretary,
how did you explain that to the Marines that didn't get medals? That we restored their medals because of that disastrous withdrawal in Afghanistan. Did you explain that to your constituents when Joe Biden was asleep at the wheel and he had an AWOL Secretary of Defense?
How about this next post? How can I explain this next post to my constituents? I'm Jewish, so this doesn't really bother me, but my understanding is that this is quite offensive to many Christians. So how do you explain this post?
I'm not here to explain posts. We have an incredible commander-in-chief who
Mr.
puts our troops
Secretary.
first. I'm here for a budget hearing about our troops.
This is
historic
about
budget that's giving
our
us a
troops.
chance to defeat
Mr. Secretary,
our adversaries.
Mr.
President
Secretary,
Trump is
please.
doing that
This
in
is my
world-class
time.
fashion.
This is about
Gentlelady
our
has
troops.
reclaimed her time, Mr. Secretary.
This is about our troops. This is about who is commanding our troops and if our troops can trust that they are being sent into harm's way under good strategy. The mental stability of our commander-in-chief is deeply important to our troops. It's deeply important to this country. It
wasn't
our
important to you
troops'
during Joe
lives at
Biden.
stake. I'll remind you that when there were concerns, Democrats came together, and he was not our nominee for president. So I encourage you to have the same courage that Democrats had. Mr. Secretary, you keep saying that he is the best commander-in-chief we've ever had, the best negotiator.
Talk to the troops.
13 American troops have died. More than 380 have been wounded. The Strait of Hormuz, which was wide open, is now closed. Less than 90% of traffic through the strait is still not going despite the ceasefire. The Iranian regime is still in power. It still has nuclear material. The war is costing Americans billions of dollars. And Mr. Secretary, if you think that this is what winning looks like, then maybe we should be questioning your mental stability. Maybe you are the one responsible for this failure, and the president should think about replacing you. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
When I ask the question, why is the United States so fucked up all the time? And why can't the country just be normal? Why can't our country, with our tax dollars, with our elected politicians, why can't our country be normal? And the way that Noam Chomsky answered that question many years ago, again, this was like 30 years ago, he said, when you think of the United States, or when you talk about the United States, he says you have to think about what are you talking about? What is the United States? Is the United States the citizens, or is it the politicians, or is it the people who pull the strings of the politicians?